So 432C is a Pantone color. It's the first question that anybody asks, so I just have to put it out there. It's gray, and I'm actually not wearing gray today, but normally I'm wearing a little bit of gray. This is the core team, and a lot of this work is work that Mike did, who's our design director. All four of us went to worked at Condé Nast for many years, and then we left. And we worked on the websites there. So Sal.com is the big fashion site that we worked on. Concierge was the travel site, and Epicurious was a food site. And then we also worked with the magazines like Vogue and GQ to work on their web properties. And then I left in 2008 to start my own company. And our mission is really to create beautiful, unique products, and with very high standards in terms of user experience, design, and production. The way we go about any product is really about the creativity in all aspects of the development. And we also, what makes us different from other companies that Condé Nast works for example, is that our products are made to be sustainable and to last a long time and to actually grow with the business. And then we like to work with emerging technology too, which is kind of why we're here. And then we believe that design should optimize the relationship between your business objectives and your user experience. We focus on how your goals will best resonate with your audience, influencing outcomes holistically through design, information architecture, and interface. And our purpose is to create an interactive experience of the highest quality, both for users and your business. So what we do is we make a lot of mobile social apps, websites, content management systems, brand identity, visual language. I'm going to show you environmental installation that we did, photography, video, print design, and then strategy work, including editorial and content, social, communications, marketing, user testing and execution, user plan testing and execution, which I'll show you some stuff about. And then just administration stuff. Like these are basically the services that we bring to our clients. And these are some of our clients. So we did some work with a lot of food properties, like Lydia Bastianich is a big kind of celebrity chef in the United States. Epicurious is the website that we worked for and that we continue to work for. And then music industry like Rolling Stone, Maroon 5, and then I'm going to show you some stuff that we did for Vera Wang, who's a fashion designer. Teen Vogue, which is a fashion property for girls. And then Lord & Taylor, which is a big department store in the States. So Vera Wang came to us and said, we want an app, and probably iOS, and it should kind of have something to do with the wedding industry, since that's basically her main audience, even though she does do ready-to-wear and kind of couture fashion as well. And then for us, basically, it was so open-ended, we basically had to create a system for managing the process of making an app that made sense for her and her audience and the business objectives. So from a research standpoint, we basically created these different ways of looking at how we were going to develop an app for her. So from the brand aspect, we had to look at what kind of internal assets they had in terms of defining their style. And then we actually did some research in terms of their store and their websites and their product design research to get more information in terms of how she publicly puts her brand out there. And then we also did some research in terms of her as a person, in terms of what her voice was in media. From a marketplace, we looked at competitors in terms of wedding apps in digital and analog spaces. And then we had these kind of adjacent competitors like in fashion, and then we had these tertiary ones in terms of productivity, creativity, design, party planning. And then at the same time, we had to engage the users in terms of what their attitudes and behaviors around these types of applications would be like, how their perception of Vera Wang worked into that. And then we also had to look at feature set verification and usability. And then after launch, we had usability research focus groups, and also another focus group just in terms of how the product was perceived by them. So this is actually what we got. So as in terms of a style guide, they're pretty, not that sophisticated in terms of what assets they had to give us. So they gave us a logo, a gray color, a couple of textures, and a font, which is, for them, that was kind of a style guide, but it's actually not a lot to go on, obviously. And then this was their website, which we are actually redoing now, and it's just was not very informative in terms of a brand. And then, so that's what we got, and then we basically took it on ourselves to basically do more research to figure out this brand. So this is a site visit to her her wedding boutique. So she has multiple stores in New York, but this is actually the boutique where you go in and you meet with people and you start the consultation process in terms of getting a wedding dress. So these are actually, the picture on the top left is actually the people who are putting the dresses together, and then the other pictures have to do with the actual boutique. And then the bottom here is some of the branding materials that we also took to get more information in terms of how they're actively putting their brand out there to specifically these potential wedding clients. And obviously she's a person, so it's a brand and a person, and so then we actually researched her as a persona as well. We did that online by just looking up all her videos and basically creating transcripts of her videos and putting together kind of a POV for her. These are some quotes that she did during something on style.com, which is basically about her own kind of point of view, and then also some commentary on Kate Middleton's wedding, the royal wedding in England. So I'll just read this. "It's not only about the dress to me whatsoever. She is really her own person. She has a sense of her own elegance and what is appropriate. She is showing the world that she's not just here to only dress for fashion, but she's here to dress for herself. That says volumes about who she is and the task that lies ahead of her." So, and then she also talks about skating in terms of emotional and a sense of escape artistically. We took that into basically creating a persona for her, and how she's different from other types of wedding designers and designers in general. And basically the biggest point was her attitude, the attitudinal aspect of creativity. And we basically said that the big mission for her, the narrative that we want to fulfill in this app, is that there's escape into a vision. So it needs to have some kind of inspirational, editorial, curatorial point of view. And then the ability for a user who's using the app to express their own sense of self within their own wedding planning experience. So there's a productivity aspect to it. So this was the first time within the process that we actually started marrying these different types of functionality within one app based on her own kind of persona. So along with that, we did the research in terms of her and her brand, and then we actually had to do the kind of research within the marketplace. So the way we did that was we basically looked at what was actually core to her in terms of competitors, which are wedding apps specifically, and they're digital, and we have the list of what we actually researched and went over. Then we took a step back and looked at analog versions of wedding guides and what kind of tools were available to brides in that space. Then we took another step back in terms of fashion apps and what people were doing in the fashion space. Then we took another step back in terms of productivity, creativity, design, and inspiration. So that's kind of our way of kind of modeling where this app should exist and kind of what features make sense for her, both in reference to what's out there, where there's gaps in the market, and what her brand represents. So this is the kind of coding system that we created uniquely for this. So of all the apps we looked at, we could basically put them into these four categories. It was either a productivity app, it was based on inspiration, it was based on editorial content, or it was based on a shopping experience. And then we took these and applied it to everything that was in the digital space and created basically a way of looking at all the apps that are out there so we can start seeing trends or opportunities in terms of places that maybe are not covered. So this is kind of our...
But there are surprising elements, like if it was analyzing this graphs?
It was surprising because we basically... some apps that you would think would be more editorial are actually more based on inspiration. So like the first one there, Brides Magazine, was actually more of an inspiration app than actually a content app. So there was a lot of that, and some of them were actually mostly about shopping.
What's an inspiration app?
Inspiration is like here are ways that you could think about a wedding in terms of visuals or cakes or ideas or things that are really tangential, like color theory type things that were not necessarily associated with products. Like this color is your tropical wedding color theme type thing. So the way we did it, which I was talking to Dunya about, is not kind of how you would do things. The way we did it was basically we put the researcher in the room with all the apps, and she basically spent a month going through all the apps and basically checking off the different features that were in them, looking for common features, and then associating those features to these different types of categories. So there's nothing kind of, I mean, it's statistical. It's not necessarily done in any kind of mechanical way. It's all based on the perception of our researcher going through the different apps.
So there was one person and it was going through various...
It was like 3 people doing it, yeah. And then at the end, this is actually the kind of document we gave back to them to help inform basically the decision that we made. And so then there was a detail sheet on every app. It also had pricing information, release dates, so there was just more information in terms of what was happening competitively. So then after that process, then we basically were able to start articulating a strategy. At the same time, we were doing research sessions with people who worked in our stores, people who were clients, and then also people who were actually in the process of planning a wedding. And that funneled into basically how we combined her as a brand to what was available or lacking in the marketplace and to what actually the needs of the user were. So this is basically what became our strategy for developing the app. The app's content and navigation should be conceptually as opposed to practically following the process of planning a wedding, but provide inspiration, information, and tools through a creative lens. So basically back to her ideas of empowering users, the app itself followed basically a creative process of how you kind of discover content, save it, go through kind of a research process, and then at the end go through your own personal planning process, and the app itself should follow that same structure. Extend and elaborate on Vera's POV to inspire women to create their own wedding experience and encourage self-expression. Focus on tools that track the wedding planning process to reduce anxiety, but do not attempt to replace existing solutions. So this becomes kind of like the feature creep issue where basically the client's like, we need a budget tool, we need to recreate Excel, and we need to create kind of every application that a person uses. And our message back was people are not going to change their behaviors based on how they're used to using tools, so let's make sure that we focus on the tools that reduce anxiety the most, which means that the tool is actually a unique tool that serves a unique function instead of something that is like Excel. And the app's design should reflect Vera's position as the de facto leader in the wedding space. So the look itself had to not look like any other wedding app. It had to be a leader.
Right, just to be clear, Vera's POV means her point of view.
Point of view, yeah.
Whose point of view? It's Vera Wang's point of view. Is
Yes.
it the brand's point of view or the person's? Or?
Well, we basically conflated them. So we didn't. The purpose of our research was not actually to interview her personally, because if you interview somebody personally, they're going to say, I believe this, I believe that. But instead, we looked at what she actually said publicly as a way of kind of creating a profile, a persona of her. So that ends up becoming the brand's persona as well, because at that point, she's a public figure and she's speaking to her brand's positioning. So we really made it conscious not to actually make it about her, but instead about what she's saying publicly, because that becomes reflective of the brand.
And in the process, to what extent are you working with people who are helping her manage her brands
Yeah.
and her public relations, or are you ultimately answering to her at every step?
So what was interesting about this, and what's interesting about the video that you'll see, is that we're basically feeding information into her marketing people and the people who are in charge of the business aspects of licensing of other products of hers, and the heads of the business, her husband, basically. But this strategy became what got fed back to her for her to create this video in terms of her actually then saying, this is what the app is about. So we basically gave them all the data to say, this is how she needs to come forward now and say, this is what the app is about, which is this video that then they created.
This app is my way of communicating with the bride directly. The very fact that I came from Vogue magazine and I came from Ralph Lauren gave me a very different viewpoint about fashion and gave me the freedom to make a contribution that was much more about being a designer who does wedding gowns than a bridal designer. My mother was the first iconic woman that influenced me. She made me understand that it wasn't only about design, it was about style and attitude. I have no trouble taking chances. It's part of what I love about fashion. While I adore whites and ivories, I started to push myself into color because I felt that it lent a certain romance and a certain beauty to see these dresses in a different format. And it's that yin and yang that I try to maintain every single collection. This is about women. This is about the most important day in their lives. And this is about, hopefully, my making that journey more rewarding and making them feel beautiful.
So that should really kind of, if we're doing our job, that should really summarize our whole kind of research experience. And it kind of does. So basically, she's saying this app is about giving women tools to kind of embody this very important day of their lives, to give suggestions and ideas, but actually not to take away from their own personal expression. So that's kind of how the app is designed kind of linearly in terms of the narrative and also in terms of the tools. This is kind of the screen that you land on as a home screen that basically lets the user go through and kind of track what was the latest things they used or saved. So they always have a way to go back where they are in the process. So again, even though the process is linear, where you are in it could be within a year of somebody else. So it's a very different process for every different person using it. And then you basically, there's so much content in it that you actually have sections. You have the home screen, which basically lets you navigate to any deep section, like 3 levels deep. But then you have the style section, which again is kind of like Vera's point of view. It's about her ideas of weddings and beauty, and it's really about kind of creating a inspiration kind of model. And then you have the guides, which is about researching. It's about like how you actually plan a wedding from a research standpoint. It's mostly kind of content in terms of reading and narratives. And then you go into actual planning tools, the tools that actually give the bride specific tools to help plan their wedding. So this is the style section. So Vera goes through and basically does a photo shoot and says, this is what a traditional wedding looks like. The user can then go in and take each individual elements and then mix them up and kind of create their own custom look. But this is kind of her templates for kicking off. Again, this is kind of like when you buy a wedding magazine, and it's kind of like, I'm just looking for inspiration to help me kind of imagine my own wedding. So the guide section was, again, there's several levels here. It's dresses, cakes, flowers, planning, real weddings, and registry. So basically these are all tools in narrative form to help you kind of research the wedding process. And within that, we had different templates. So we had basically an image template that lets you kind of look at photos of flowers and cakes and wedding dresses. And then we also had in there kind of the narrative templates. Like this is how you actually go through and read about how you do photography and film in the right way. And this is the planning section. So in this section is where all the tools are that actually through the whole process of the wedding you actually actively engage in the planning process. So the favorite section is where you go through and you've kind of bookmarked all your different favorite assets across the app. Inspiration boards, people, and tasks is how we separated these.
What was that with the Latin statements?
Oh, these are the designs that have Latin in them, and so they're not actually the screenshots of the app. So when we design, we put Latin in it to save space.
To what?
To create space. It's a placeholder for text.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So when we basically do the presentation, we take what we have out of the PSDs, out of the Photoshop files, but when we actually are building the app is when the real copy comes in, and we don't actually go back and take the screenshots, and that's why there's Latin copy in there, so I apologize. This is basically the inspiration board. So again, there's like kind of multiple apps within this one app. This is where you can basically take all the stuff that you favorited throughout the app. You can take your own photos that you've captured with your iPad or your iPhone, and then also you can mix it up with from the camera roll, and then you can also mix it up with colors that are predefined colors that relate back to the style section. So these are the palettes within the style section as well.
So you can color yourself.
Yeah, well, you can basically say, I want these types of flowers, but I want to use this kind of modernist palette. It's a way of kind of like imagining your whole wedding visually. And the whole design of this section is actually designed like a binder, the way people, because part of our research process discovered that these women kind of create these binders that are like huge binders that they go around with them everywhere. So part of this section was actually to replace that binder. So that's why it has this kind of tab navigation on the right side. So this is actually the metaphor of how these women actually go about their planning
Can you
process.
select also features for the husband?
She was clear that this was like this is for the brides, but I think anybody can use it. There's no like
No.
there's no like gender sensing technology.
So the ladies would probably want to select the husband as well.
Well, what they do, that's a good point. So part of our research process, obviously, a wedding isn't like a social thing. You're not going to be posting stuff on Facebook, but you're going to be sharing stuff with a small group. So what we actually have here in the people section, well, it's divided between basically the guests and the vendors, because your team, that's actually your core team, could be your mother, could be your planner. So there's this mixture of kind of guests and vendors, but you basically create a small team that you then can share any item of the app with. So you can get feedback from your mother on the dress or from your wedding planner. So this is the detail of kind of managing them, and also it tells you what table they're going to be sitting at, all that kind of specific. So basically you have the details about the person, and then you have the wedding details, which says whether or not they gave you a gift, whether or not you sent out a thank you card, who they're sitting with, who shouldn't they sit with in terms of like conflicts. And then the whole app actually, this whole section actually exports to Excel, so then you can actually go through and actually do more stuff with it if you want to do more stuff. And then the task section actually, what it does is when you sign onto the app, it basically says, tell us when you're getting married, and then it basically populates a timeline of what you should be doing within that timeline for your wedding, and then it puts onto a calendar, which then syncs with iCal. And you can go through and say remove or add things if you don't think they're appropriate. So that's the app. It was App of the Week in the App Store, which was fantastic. And that's that. And I'm going to tell you a couple more things unless there's any questions on this particular process.
Can you tell us something about the size of your team that was
Yeah.
working on this and the time frame?
Okay, so in New York, we have basically, Jamie's our head of technology, and he's the person who does a lot of the kind of, for our projects, he does a lot of the front end or kind of the database development and manages kind of other development teams. So we have a team in San Francisco that we work with that does our app development. So there's 3 guys in San Francisco doing app development. In New York, we had Jamie basically creating the CMS tools and all the stuff for publishing content. We had, from the research side, we had Chris, who did all the research in terms of environmental, marketplace, user research, and she had an assistant who was then working with her in terms of user experience. And then we have a project manager, a designer, me. I'm not keeping count here. It's a small team. Yeah, it's a small team. There's not. We're actually very kind of small team that actually I think we crank out a lot of work considering how small we are. And then the process itself was like a 6-month process, which to us is a really long process for an app. The one I'm going to show you next is a 2-month one, so it's like night and day. But it's because they basically came to us and said, you take as much time as you need to figure it out. And so then that's why we had like such an extended discovery phase. But I think what's great about this kind of thing is when you say make an app and you kind of don't know what the app is going to be, but then by the time you're done, you're like, well, of course it's that. Then it's kind of like you had a good experience. You had a good discovery phase because at the end it feels like that's the only thing that we could really come out of that process. So it feels really right in that sense. So this is an app we did actually in August for Teen Vogue. So we've done a lot of work for Teen Vogue, and we've done 3 apps for them so far. This app was basically, they created this promotion called Back to School Saturday. So they're basically trying to capture all this commerce that's happening when people basically go back to school. And when you add up all the numbers, it's actually the second highest shopping event of the whole year after Christmas. So they basically are trying to own this space. They're trying to like corner the market and say, we kind of create this back to school event. And that was really what the drive of this app was. And our kind of mission was to kind of make it actually useful past one day of the year, which is what they wanted. So it took a lot of it was also a quick process. It was 2 months, and we basically decided to create this app that was about how Teen Vogue can basically be your shopping companion to finding like deals and local deals with your phone. So it's called Teen Vogue Insider, and basically you can go through and you can either scan your magazine, and the technology they have for the scan isn't based on watermarking or what's the other code stuff called? QR code. It's not QR code. It's basically image recognition, that if you scan the magazine, you will get videos or related content to that page in the magazine. And then also, you basically have local deals in terms of advertisers who are basically giving deals. So this was actually really popular, and they got a lot of press out of it, and successful. Like we're actually working on basically another mobile version of it for Android. And we actually, now they're extending it, so there's going to be a holiday event, there's going to be an event in March. So it kind of got the kind of, the growth that we really wanted. So we also did the video for it, that was the kind of viral marketing video. So I think you saw that there's kind of like that point system in there. So basically, whenever you interact with any of the kind of features, you get points that enter you into a sweepstakes, and that's actually this system that we created where they have rolling sweepstakes, and then you earn like thousands of points, and then you win stuff. So that was a really quick thing. Any question on that? I'll go to the next thing. Just a little something. Lord & Taylor is a big department store, and last year they basically came and said we need to do something digital around Fashion Night Out, which is a kind of shopping day. It's another shopping day that Vogue magazine kind of started to say, let's get people spending money in department stores. So they came to us because they wanted something digital, and we basically had to come back and present to them a solution. So the solution that we created was that it was actually the 10th anniversary of September 11th. And we basically felt there was enough distance and time to basically say, New York's a great place, let's remember why we love New York. Candy, who's this editor at Vogue, created this story of why she loves New York, and then it encouraged people on Facebook to upload their pictures and their stories of why they love New York. So it became a way of kind of saying, Fashion Night Out is happening the same week as September 11th. Let's all, remember why New York is great. And then what happened on Fashion Night Out is all the stories and photos that people uploaded were being printed off in the windows, and the models were there hanging them up, and people could actually go up to the window and print directly to the printers with their phones. And that's Candy down there signing books. And then after the event, they left it up, and it became kind of this kind of very messy kind of photo display that is very not like them. And this was actually kind of challenging for them to kind of think in this way. But in the end, they were really happy with it, and it was really successful. So that's all I was going to show today.